As said in the first episode, Alex was meant to be the main protagonist in the Third Strike series, replacing the poster boys until now, Ken and Ryu. While it was an interesting change to pace to say at least, by having new characters and new playstyles, if you simply check my comment section, there will be a multitude of comments saying that he sucks and he shouldn't be in the future game, and etc. But why is this? Why do people, both young and old, hate our beloved sexy man? Well, it's not entirely his fault. I know. It's crazy that the Alex diehard is defending him, but hear me out. I don't think it's entirely Alex's fault that he failed as a poster boy. If we're simply just like looking at his character and moveset, we're missing the bigger picture. And the bigger picture shows the failures of Alex's introduction, the finances of Street Fighter 3, and Capcom's faith in the project. For now, let's talk about Capcom's goal for Alex.
Part 1. Bad design.
While it was fairly jarring replacing new main characters with one, there have always been duos that at least reflect Ken and Ryu's dynamic. Cody and Guy from the Office series were a prime example of that. One is a cool-headed practitioner of martial arts, and the other was a hot-headed ruffian. Granted, they were from Final Fight, an already established game, but there are examples of characters like Adon, who was a change of pace for a fighting style, and still had some fans. But I think that one of the reasons why Alex failed as a poster boy is exactly why Cody and Guy succeeded. Because he was pushed to replace two characters at once. Typically, fighting games have duos that parallel each other. Ryu and Ken, Sol and Kai, Luke and Jamie, and while these characters don't have to play similarly, they are at least parallels to each other in gameplay or personalities. Alex's case was different. Ken and Ryu were Shoto, meaning that they had things like Shoto normals and specials with a heavy emphasis on fundamentals and spacing. But Alex was a restaurant grappler, which was way more closer to someone like E-Honda and Armika. This is very much baffled returning players and alienated newcomers to an extent. I'll start with the newcomers. I actually don't think Alex was a bad design. I mean, he was built around what was very popular in the 80s and 90s, was wrestling. Watch part 1 for more of his origins. So he can definitely bring in new people, but the fact of the matter was, he was a charge character, which means you need to hold down and or back for a short period, and grapplers, which means you had to do 360 movements, which was weird for new players. They were going to struggle with him, since they needed to spend money to practice him, at least in the arcades. But for returning players, I have beef with you. You guys swear like you didn't have Ryu and Ken back then, but you did, for at least 3 whole games. For real. Let's talk about why he kind of sucked for returning players. His moveset is awkward. Typically for main characters of fighting games, their movements is built around the rules of the game and are easy to pick up, hard to master. More often than not, their normals have decent range and are special move cancelable. They might also have like a fireball or moves that knock down and lead to good pressure, and their supers are powerful and versatile. But above all else, the main characters are consistent. Alex, however, is not. For one, most of the normals aren't bad on paper, but there are a couple of things that make them hard to use consistently. Comparing them to the two Shotos, what makes the normals at least functional is that they are fast and cancelable to make them good pokes and safe from parries reliably. Alex doesn't have this basic function. His only good cancelable normals are his stand medium punch and his close medium kick. Were not bad, especially medium punch because it's a decent anti-air. The medium kick shows off the start of the inconsistencies I mentioned before. If you're not basically point blank at the opponent, it will either not come out or not connect. And if you're slightly out of throw range, you'll get this. Another example of inconsistency is his standing leg kick. It's a cancelable normal, but it doesn't really combo into anything but his EX DP and Super 2, which leads us into his meterless damage or lack thereof. Many times a meterless optimal combo will look like this. Meanwhile, for Ken it looks like this. Aside from his command grab, his grounded special moves require him to spend meter to get a knockdown, and for a grappler the Oki is extremely important, and for a rushdown, it's not a good look either. This is not to say that if you need to spend meter that your character is bad. For Alex and his supers, it kinda is. For Super 1 and 3, you need a full singular bar for your super, so you're either forced to save it for less damage / Oki, or spend your meter on supers that you can't even combo into reliably, or at all. There are other things that make him a bad character, and if Batfail doesn't do a bad balance video on Alex, then I will. To move past the subject, other things include moves that are slow or unsafe, his mixed game isn't that good because of the parry mechanics. All this makes Alex not a good contender for the main protagonist. But like, is it really his fault? What's strange is that the developers know what good and bad moves are. They specifically rebalanced Sean in Third Strike so he can be lore accurate, and how bad he is. So why didn't they rebalance Alex to be good? By the way, if you want to watch a good video that goes into detail about Sean, go watch Raphael's good and bad balance on Sean. Further proof comes from the Capcom vs. Guest interview with Tomoshi Sadamoto. He had this to say. Sean is what we call a compatibility character. He's a character that people should use when they want to give themselves a handicap. For example, if friends wanted to fight, but one was stronger, the strong one could say, I'll use Sean, so let's play. And that way, friends could play together. This is at least proof that the developers thought about power dynamics when it came to characters. And the major changes to Sean from Second Impact and to Third Strike made me think that they just ignored Alex. This is somewhat untrue. While he did think about balance for the game, most of the team was actually new. In the Polygon interview Street Fighter 3 in Oral History, Shinichiro Obata, Street Fighter 3 planner, had this to say about the new team. The thing about Street Fighter 3's team was that, surprisingly, even though it was Capcom, which is known for fighting games, 70 to 80% of the team members had no experience making fighting games. Why that was the case, I honestly have no idea, but there were people in the team who were quite inexperienced. I think more than half of them, maybe the planners and programmers, weren't familiar with fighting games at all. By this point, a lot of the old guard, the people who had worked on the fighting games beforehand, like Street Fighter 2 co-planner Akira Nishitani, had already left the company. And even amongst those of the older Street Fighter games who were still around Capcom at the time, most of them were not on the Street Fighter 3 team. Now you might think that, because the team was new, they might have someone experienced to work on the balancing of the game. You know, the balance is extremely important to Street Fighter 3. Well, this might be the craziest part of the interview, and maybe the entire video. It goes on to say, another problem in terms of the game's balance was that the balancing and adjustments for the characters were done by separate people. So the balance was all over the place. One person would design the character to be more traditional and Street Fighter-like, and then another would do it in the Darkstalker style. There was no unity. What's crazier is that, up to that point, all the Street Fighter games, almost all of it is done by one person, an extremely skilled programmer named Yasunori Harada. He had been handling everything, but for Street Fighter 3, we changed it so everyone would handle their own specific characters. There are pros and cons to the type of approach. This is absolutely crazy. I don't think I've ever heard of separate people working on different characters for the balancing before. I mean, I have heard of inexperienced people / teams not working on a fighting game, but for different people to work on the balancing separately is insane to me, personally. What doesn't help is the extremely short turnaround time for the future games in the Street Fighter 3 series. In the making of Street Fighter 3 Third Strike interviews with developers, Haruhiro Murata, who worked on the events / techs and grade systems, and Hidetoshi Ishizawa, the main planner, had this to say about the testing release of Third Strike. Third Strike had a really long location test, didn't it? Like almost a month? Yeah, when you compare the version of the game from the beginning of the location test and what we ended up with, it was like two entirely different games. And 70% of the changes was made in the last 3 days. It's crazy. It almost feels like the entire game was made in 1 week. Granted, they were talking about Third Strike here, but the idea of resources being scarce still persists even towards the final iteration of the series.
Part 2, Resources.
Speaking of resources, along with this, I think there may have been another reason why not much attention was paid to Alex and the struggles as the main character. It has to do with the resources for the company. The beginning of Street Fighter 3's life wasn't that bad. The Game Machine magazine put it at their number one arcade games in the April 1st, 1997 issue, beating out games like Real Bout, Fatal Fury, Puyo Puyo 3, and even Capcom's own Street Fighter vs. X-Men. However, with an extremely high budget, the game struggled to stay afloat. One of Street Fighter 3's planner, Shinichiro Obata, had this to say in the interview with Polygon. The game didn't really sell well. I think it cost like 1 billion yen, $8 million, to develop, which back in the day was very, very high budget. I think it's in terms of profit and losses, it might as well have been zero in the end. When we released Second Impact and Third Strike, I think the overall project became more profitable at that point. I remember the producer at the time saying, we were lucky the game didn't put us in the red. But yeah, I don't know if it only sold 1,000 units. I imagine we sold a little more than that. Because New Generation was released back in 1986, and a year later Street Fighter 3 and Second Impact were set to release, I believe that Capcom struggled to delegate resources, and it shows. When a game designer named Hidetoshi Nyoji Ishiwada joined the team, Obata says, "You'd work on Street Fighter Alpha 2. He was my kohai, my subordinate employee. But he ended up joining the team, and I think he was very interested in the Berry system. So he focused most of his energy in adjustments and balancing for that system. There were also major changes that happened between New Gen and Second Impact. Game mechanic changes, new characters were added, and bonus stages were added. I don't believe there were many changes that could have been made to many characters, let alone their new main protagonist. And despite Second Impact being the top 3 games in Game Machine's 1987 issue of the magazine, and making $6 million, that's $6 million barely making the $8 million new gen cost. I still don't think they have the money to make major changes to characters. We'll talk about it in a future video, but another small thing that might have added to the balancing of characters was actually the animations. Since most of the sprites were done by hand and then redrawn into sprites, the time and money that would have been dedicated to redrawing the balancing would have been crazy expensive. Not only this, but they were adding 5 new characters to Third Strike with a fan favorite Chun-Li, so I don't think they would have cared about fixing new combos that much. Sure, they did major changes to Sean, but that was mostly on purpose, and for the rest of the cast, they didn't really do too much to change them drastically. What also didn't help was Capcom and all their projects. Here are some of the games that were released during the years of 1996 to 2000. X-Men vs. Street Fighter, Street Fighter 3 New Generations, Street Fighter 3 Second Impact, Street Fighter Alpha 2, Street Fighter EX, Vampire Sabers, Lord of Vampire, Street Fighter Collection 2, Capcom vs. SNK, Marvel vs. Capcom 2. And this is not even talk about the games that they had to compete with, which we will talk about in the next section.
Part 3, Faith.
While resources are a major part to game success, I think another part that is relevant to this study is how the company employees understood and supported the game. This is bold for me to say, but for Third Strike in specific, I don't think the Street Fighter team at Capcom had much faith in the game, specifically the developers. Chris Tang, who worked as design support for Street Fighter 3, said this about the characters. So I did not have a favorable opinion of the designs when I first saw them, especially when they were like in black and white facts, but later on we found out that they had a lot of frames animation. They were able to leverage that to make them kind of cool. My impression of the designs were not favorable. Even people outside of the programming team didn't have good opinions to say about the game. Brian Duke, who was the director of national sales at Capcom, said this: I just remember once again being rather disappointed that it was so similar to play on the surface. And I think that's the time when I went to Japan and they told me it was coming. And I was like, my God, guys, why do you keep doing this? And that's when they gave me the analogy of hitting a single or double rather than a home run. It also didn't help that the team felt extreme pressure from the company to make a good game. Obata retells in the Polygon interview, there was just so much pressure from within the company and the teams. Because this was Street Fighter 3, right? You know, this is a sequel or what came after the legendary Street Fighter 2. So there was just no way this game would be allowed to fail. And the team themselves, they were feeling that pressure. But they also felt the sense of obligation to complete what they were trying to do. So there's a lot of indecisiveness. There are a lot of back and forth discussion on what to do, and eventually they figured it out. Yeah, maybe we should do this, and that. But it took a lot of time for the team to gather its bearings. Along with this, some people felt like they can help with some shortcomings, but maybe due to upper management or lack of experience, they couldn't. Street Fighter 3 artist Akira Yasuda said this: when there were certain parts of the design that weren't going well, I would step in and maybe fix up a few things, but I didn't have such a concerted involvement in the game. Despite this, I suppose this wouldn't deter Capcom from putting Fate in their big Street Fighter 3 game, right? I mean, critically, the Street Fighter 3 series did extremely well. It was giving outlets on average gave the series no less than a 3.5, and some people were praising the art style and gameplay. But many people were questioning why Capcom didn't switch to the future of fighting games, 3D. Well, they were. And crossover games and other series and so many other games that I don't think they could have really focused their efforts into supporting their games. Or at least nurturing them. I mean, we just discussed how Capcom brought people from different games into the big new installment. I don't think there was much faith put into the team. Obata says this about Third Strike: after Second Impact came out, Capcom had a postmortem regarding what worked with the game and what didn't. And they realized that the design needed to be put into the hands of an experienced designer. So that's why Hidetoshi Nioji Ishizawa became the lead designer of the project and took it forward. The end result of that is Third Strike. Third Strike was made under his careful direction. Speaking of the game's release, yes, the game did pretty well, but it didn't have its critiques, specifically with the characters. Here's what assistant editor Electronic Games Monthly Ken Williams had to say about Alex. Having all new characters really threw me off the storyline. I had problems with the new characters, but having Alex be the new main guy, I was like, he's never gonna be my main ever. That's never gonna happen. Obviously, we were doing just fine with Ken. If Western players wanted to play a Western character, Ken was the Western character. He's American. He's an American character with Japanese blood or whatever his heritage was. This isn't helped by comments from players saying that they didn't understand the new characters like Alex. I mean, one of my commenters who was active during the scene had this to say. I'll try to summarize. My friends and I were into Street Fighter 2. It was a phenomenon. By the time 3 came out, I guess my life was a bit different. In college and working, 3 just didn't quite have the same appeal. I guess it makes sense now, as its origins were to be a new non-Street Fighter themed fighter. I guess I got sense that. By the time Third Strike came out, it was improved. I do admire the game, and a few characters are linked to me. Oro, 12, Remy. But Alex is so generic. Stan's weird, fits no quote-unquote type of character. Wears commando pants, boots, and suspenders that aren't his shoulders. Okay. I'll admit that I never even tried to look into this story. I'll do that now, I guess. I suppose this was the sentiment of Street Fighter 3 at the time. Even FGC figurehead James Chen at the time didn't really rock with the new characters. It was interesting because it was all new characters except Ryu and Ken. And nostalgia is one hell of a drug. So a lot of people were like, I don't care about these new characters. What is Oro like? What is this? You know, it was weird. I know a lot of people who didn't like the game that much at all. And I think it had to do with the fact that a lot of the returning characters just didn't come back. Street Fighter 3 struggled. As stated all over in this video, the team really struggled not only with the balancing, but also the project overall. Whether that be the inexperienced team or a lack of resources. It also didn't help that the company and its team just didn't fully understand or support the project. And with comments from journalists, players, and figureheads, it makes sense that Capcom and the team didn't really feel motivated to support the game fully. And this sucks, because the Street Fighter 3 series not only is fun, but revolutionary to the fighting game genre. The gameplay is fantastic, some of the best in the series, and the art style is some of the best, and still is, in the genre. The characters are memorable, the music is perfect, and most importantly, it gave us moments like this. But Alex and the game couldn't meet expectations. People were expecting a new revolutionary fighting game and new characters that would bring the new evolution of fighting games. But instead we got a good game and awkward characters. But people didn't seem to like it enough to support it. And because of this, Alex is a bad character. But you know what? To me, Alex represents everything about Street Fighter 3. He is someone who is trying something new, with no established background, that took a leap of faith and did it their own way. And even though Alex is a bad character, he still lives on in players' hearts. In my research, I still read interviews where people were still in the full support of the game and its characters. And if the passion isn't there, the disdain and confusion of the project became full passion for the game. And this passion is even found in players like me, to this day, love Alex with all of their heart. The Alex Nation is still alive and well, and we will continue playing until it's over.
Part 4, my opinion.
And you know what? The crazy thing is, I think Alex could have worked. As far as replacing the main duo, his personality was more tuned to Ken, maybe, but his story is more of a reflection of Ryu. I mean, Alex is trained formally by his master Tom, and Ryu even had a closer relation to Alex than Ken. Not only that, but Ryu's master was killed by a godlike entity, Akuma. So I think he would have really sympathized with Alex and trained him. So, you might be thinking, who should have replaced Ken? Well, other than Sean. Sean literally goes out to seek training from Ken. Not only that, but there are comics that show off interaction between Sean and Alex. I believe that if these two characters were pushed together more to be like a rival / successor of both Ryu and Ken, then I think he could have been way more successful than as main protagonist. As far as like gameplay goes, we have Street Fighter V Alex, which I think is a pretty good iteration of Alex. And if you want to see like an actually good balanced Alex, check out Force Strike. But I think a good example of a single character being the successor is Tekken 8's Reina, where she is a combination and successor to previous characters. It's somewhat hard to do this because there are no other examples of a character like Alex, but now this is me getting to lore stuff way earlier than I wanted to. But in the previous video, I mentioned that Gil has an interest in Alex. I believe that this is due to Alex being attuned to Gil's power. But that's for a video for another time. Maybe in the future. We're getting to the ending of this video, but I wanted to say, first of all, if you're still watching this, I have to say thank you so much. I really love Alex. I love fighting games. It's been a big part of my life, and I've been wanting to do a video like this for a while. And if you're still watching, you are the reason why I'm making this video. I really wanted to just make a video that is interesting and a topic that may interest some people. And as of the writing of this last bit, it is Friday, June 6th at 10 a.m. The day that Street Fighter 6 Season 3 is going to be announced. And I hope he comes back. Me and other players love this guy. And I love you. Thank you so much. Now on to the conclusion. This was a video about why Alex failed as a main protagonist. Remember? I didn't. I got lost in the rabbit hole that is game development. I wanted to make this video because I love Alex and I wanted a reason why he failed. And I learned that he didn't. And by extension, Street Fighter 3 didn't fail. Despite all of the failings as a character in his series, they both lived on. They both became a part of the fighting game community. Obviously one more than the other. But they're loved now. Loved by me, by the fighting game community, and developers. I'll end this video with a quote that I think does a pretty good job explaining why Third Strike works so well as a game. You know, there are many different approaches you can take to game design. One approach, which we took for Street Fighter 3, is to design your game around unanswerables. I think with any game, players will search for the best tactic, the best strategy, like if X happens, you should always do Y. If you do this, you always win. There are competitive games like that, where the match is essentially a confrontation of theoretical knowledge that each player has to build up. But Street Fighter 3 is a game that, by design, doesn't have a fixed answer to those questions. There's no best tactic. You can spend your whole life trying to find a perfect theoretical approach to a situation in Street Fighter 3, but it will never be quite right. You always have to be reading your opponent in the moment. You can't just fall back in your theories. It's a game that lets you search for answers forever. And that was the opposite of Street Fighter 2. Hi everyone. Thank you for watching. My numbers have been growing recently and it feels pretty good. I've been doing YouTube for about 10 years now. Something like that. And my old channel was made for my music and my fighting game videos, and I was sad that it was lost, now forever lost. And I'm back with way more subscribers and way more support, not only from my friends, the close ones, but also you guys, and I greatly appreciate it. And I greatly appreciate you all being here. This is part 2 of 7 of my Alex series. And for my subscribers, you guys know that I've been posting Alex every day for about a month now. Depending on how the announcement goes, either I'm going to be an Alex main in Street Fighter 6 or I am not. Only time can tell. But the Alex breakdown series will continue until it's finished. I promise you that. This is going to be released up until maybe around the end of this month. And from there, I'm going to try, emphasis on try, to re-record everything to make an about like an hour-long video. No promises, but we'll see what happens. If you want more of my content, which is fighting games, music, and analysis like this, consider subscribing. But before you subscribe, please watch my other videos and gauge whether you like it or not. With all that being said, thank you so much for everyone for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye. Couple announcements. I made a remix of Elena's new theme for Street Fighter 6, so go check that out. Please go read the Polygon interview. It's so fucking good. If you want to watch me stream, I'm going to be streaming later on today around 3 p.m. PST. Going to be playing Third Strike and a little bit of Street Fighter 6. And I am a music producer / composer. And I highly encourage everyone, if you enjoyed the music in this video, to go check out my albums. Link in the description. Okay, bye for real. Bye everyone. Bye.
I need a glass of wine too. All right. Thank you, Takeuchi-san, for that very special message. We cannot wait for when the time is right to share more leading into the anniversary of Resident Evil. Now it is time for the next big update for a beloved franchise.
Yo, Alex! Holy shit, Alex! Holy shit! No way! Yes! 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 See Viper! Oh my god, yes! Yes, we win! We win! Oh my god, holy shit, we won! We won! We won! We won! We won! Holy shit, we won! Fuck you, Sagat, I fucking hate you. Oh my god, holy shit, we won! This is the big news! We won! Oh! Wait, we got gameplay? We got gameplay? Okay, it looks kind of cool, I can't lie. We won. We won. We won, that's all I care about. That's literally all I care about. That's literally all I fucking care about. We won. Oh my god, we won. That's it. That's all we need. That's all I need.